Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Gripe, the show for short, sweet reviews of new release movies, plus the one thing that annoyed me the most. Today, I'm going to be talking about Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and there will be spoilers, so be warned. And the reason is, I didn't really want to do a spoiler review, but at the same time, there's just a lot of stuff that goes on in here. And just given the nature of this movie, I think it was appropriate to really do the story justice and to explain kind of what I felt about this movie in the context of the DC universe that started with Man of Steel and how that's going to grow moving forward. But what we have right now is Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. So I'm going to do my format a little bit differently today too. I'm going to be talking about what was good and what was bad, because right off the bat I'm going to say this. I actually enjoyed this movie. It's not a perfect movie, and that's an understatement. In fact, it's an extremely flawed movie, but at its core, it's still enjoyable as a superhero movie, as something that we can watch, entertain us, and certainly build up these characters in kind of a new direction that we haven't seen yet. So obviously, following on the heels of Man of Steel, the question was, can Zack Snyder actually build a superhero movie that isn't dour and bleak? And the answer is no, or at least he still has not been able to do so. This is his third superhero movie, I think. Realistically, yes, this is his third superhero movie after Watchmen and Man of Steel. So at this point, he really hasn't, been able to necessarily capture what we've seen from, say, Marvel. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because DC is not Marvel. They're not the same thing. So there's nothing wrong necessarily with having a story that's a little bit darker, a little bit more mature. And when I say mature, not necessarily meaning just for an adult audience, but meaning that it deals with some more complex issues than some of the MCU movies do. I mean, they tackle them. Like, I think back to Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 tackles some of the issues, but they kind of sugarcoat it a little bit, whereas this movie, they really do not sugarcoat it. And I know that puts some people off, but at the same time, his take on Man of Steel is the only reason I liked Man of Steel, because I don't like Superman as a character. I'm going to say that outright. I don't like Superman as a character. I don't like the idea of a character that is basically God. There's nothing intriguing about a God character unless you can put some sort of conflict in there, which they did in Man of Steel. They made Superman not just, the happy, I'm going to save the day kind of superhero. No, they actually made him into something more complicated and darker, which I certainly appreciated. And it's something that I guess is more in the comics than what, necessarily we've seen with, say, the Christopher Reeve Superman movie back from the 70s. So, long story short, I did enjoy it, but I recognize how horribly flawed it is as a movie. So I'm going to kind of do the good and the bad. One of the things that really stands out as a good in this movie is the addition of Batman, and this is one that I think was, I was really nervous about this movie for a number of reasons. The top of the list was Ben Affleck as Batman. I wasn't worried about Zack Snyder. I knew what Zack Snyder was going to give us, and it didn't surprise me. I knew what Henry Cavill was going to give us as Superman, so he didn't really... Actually, he surprised me in a good way, but I'll get to that. But what I wasn't sure about was Batman. I wasn't sure how Ben Affleck would do. And now Ben Affleck has come a long way since Daredevil. We've all come a long way since Daredevil. Movies have changed significantly since, 2003 when Daredevil came out. We've seen comic book movies become darker, or also more, deliberate, more exacting. There's a lot more nuance to superhero movies than there was before. They might be a little more outlandish too, but there's a lot more intricacy to them than there were before. And adding Ben Affleck was actually a really smart move, because in the past, 5-6 years, or whenever Gone Baby Gone came out, I think that was 2008. But basically, Ben Affleck has become a fantastic filmmaker. He was always a good actor, not a great actor, but a good actor, and brought something to his films. But when he started directing movies with Gone Baby Gone, Argo, The Town, he really showcased that he has a talent for characters, for story, for plot, things like that. So having him as Batman now, after the experiences that he's had with as a director, was a smart move because he actually brought a lot more character to Bruce Wayne and Batman than we saw maybe with Christian Bale. I liked Christian Bale, but there was always something just lacking in his character. And I think Ben Affleck wasn't perfect, but he certainly brought a different perspective to it and a lot more character to the story that we wanted. He's an excellent Bruce Wayne, and as Batman, he is hard. He is the brawler Batman that you get in like Arkham Knight kind of game. That's the kind of Batman, we like to see. But he also is a tortured Batman, and that's one of the things that I really liked about this movie is they didn't spoon-feed you what had happened, but they showed you something seriously went wrong. His mansion is burned. You've got Robin's suit with the Joker's handwriting all over it, basically indicating Robin is dead. Robin is long gone. And, Batman is he's an angry man, and especially with one of the best things about this movie was the opening scene. Now, obviously, that's not the best thing, but it's one of the highlights of this movie, is the opening scene. It shows, Bruce Wayne in Metropolis when Superman is fighting Zod. And, he is just on the ground with the people, and he's watching this, take place above him. He's watching, these two, Kryptonians just destroy the city, and it burns him. It burns inside. You can see that there's that rage that builds. And coupled with, they throw in the Batman origin story, and I want to give that as a, nick against this movie, because even though it was integral to how the story played out, having that origin story kind of, brought back to us, I don't need to see it again. It's like Spider-Man. They better not show an origin in Spider-Man Homecoming, but we've seen the Batman origin so many times. We even saw it in Watchmen. We saw it alluded to in Watchmen. It's something we've seen so many times. There has to be a point where you just kind of say, okay, we know Batman's backstory. This is how we are moving forward. And obviously at this point, Batman is older. He's broken. He's, morally tired. He's, angry. So it's a much different Batman than we saw in, say, like, the Tim Burton Batman movies, or definitely the Joel Schumacher. He's much more tortured. And that just throws into, the death scene of his parents throws in kind of to help that tortured soul. But it just wasn't, I don't think it was necessary. We already know Batman was tortured. And especially when you see, like, Robin's suit with, the Joker's handwriting all over it, that tells you that there's some crazy stuff has gone down. But basically, I mean, the Batman storyline really does focus on, Batman is his, in his detective mode. He's, trying to, he believes that someone is bringing a dirty bomb into Gotham. And so while he's on one side kind of like trying to, grapple with the morality of, having somebody like Superman is a bad thing. We don't want to have somebody who can basically destroy the human race at will. So he wants basically to get a hold of kryptonite. He wants to get a hold of something to be able to use, to kind of like as a weapon against, Superman if he ever becomes a threat. Well, not even if he ever does, but just the inevitability that he could become a threat. And there's this really weird dream sequence that kind of alludes to the idea that when Superman does go off the rails, the world will, like, burn, basically. Like, he will destroy the world if he went off the rails. And Batman has this vision that, kind of, shows him just how dangerous Superman can be. But, he wants to, while he's, trying to figure out what to do about Superman, he also is, trying to figure out what, is going on with this dirty bomb in Gotham. And finds out that actually the two are kind of, these two paths are inextricably linked. And what they're actually bringing into Gotham is not a bomb, but it's actually the kryptonite that they found in the Indian Ocean, this big cache of kryptonite. So he wants that in order to get his weapon so that he can basically kill Superman. His goal is to kill Superman. So this isn't the Batman of, like, I don't kill. This is the Batman of, I am just morally broken at this point, so I will kill Superman if necessary. Or I will kill Superman is kind of maybe the end result of his, plan here. So then you have Superman. And here's another part that I was a little bit iffy about. Again, it's integral to the plot, but I'm a little iffy about it, was when Superman is introduced, Lois is in the Middle East, and she's basically on this, she's doing a story on, a warlord. And during her conversation, some stuff goes down. They find out, her cameraman is a CIA guy, and basically the mercenaries start killing everybody in this compound. And then Superman shows up, saves Lois, but when he does that, the damage is done. He essentially dooms that village to the military coming in and, attacking innocent civilians and all that. So Superman kind of becomes this target again of he has this power to act at will, but he has no restraint. There's nothing that's governing him from, just going and doing whatever he wants. And so the character played by Holly Hunter, a senator, basically is asking this question, is what do we do with Superman, with somebody who doesn't really obey the laws? Because even though he might be saving people, what are the long-term effects? And there's somebody who has a potential solution to their problem, and that somebody is Lex Luthor Jr., played by Jesse Eisenberg. Now, this guy was a serious point of controversy before the movie came out, and he still is. Personally, I thought Jesse Eisenberg did a fantastic job as Lex Luthor Jr. And I'm calling him Lex Luthor Jr. because he is not Lex Luthor, the dad. And there's also that allusion in the story. But he plays kind of that cocky, social network type of character again here. But he does it with even more, zany flair. And there's points where you can just see, there's anxiety there. Not just this, madness, but there's also anxiety of something else that's coming. And when they get to the end of the movie, and I'll get to that in a minute, but you get to the end of the movie and you see that, ultimately he is the mastermind of this whole thing. He's the one who kind of convinced Bruce Wayne that there is something coming into Gotham, but he also knows that by what he's bringing in is going to entice Bruce to fight Superman. So, and at the same time, by pushing Superman to this, brink, and by pushing, the government to where can we trust Superman, he ultimately gets he gets inside and creates massive havoc. He actually bombs the Senate chamber when they don't give him his way, basically. Ultimately, his goal was to get the kryptonite in, and Holly Hunter's character says no, because I'm not going to give you a silver bullet to kill Superman, basically. But he's going to do that anyway. He's going to get it in there, and, whether she was on his side or not. Ultimately, she's not on her side, and he blows up, the Capitol building. And even though Superman wasn't responsible for it, people still blame him because it's you are this character who's supposed to be able to save people. Why didn't you do it? And the reality is that he wasn't looking to save. He just, he's kind of in this am I doing the right thing? He's obsessed with this Batman character. He's obsessed with all these people who are creating moral dilemmas in the human race, and ultimately he can't save everyone. And the only person that he wants to be able to save is Lois, or in the case as it goes out, his mom. This is where the plot really starts to get convoluted, and that's one of the biggest problems of this movie, is there are so many different things going on because the movie is trying to build the Justice League right off the bat. Where we had with the Marvel Universe, we had, 5 movies before we had the Avengers. And in those 5 movies, I'd really say starting with really Iron Man 2, we started to put these characters into the larger context. We didn't just throw them all in there. We started putting them into that context. Whereas here, they throw Wonder Woman in. Her storyline is kind of tacked on. Obviously, it helps when she shows up, to fight, Doomsday at the end, but it's just kind of tacked on that she's, there trying to find, she's trying to talk to Lex to get a photograph back, and, but her role really doesn't mean anything until, except that Bruce Wayne discovers she's not actually, a human. She's something else. She's been alive for, at the very least, 100 years, and maybe even longer. So he knows that she's one of these what Lex calls metahumans, which include obviously. So you got Wonder Woman, you got Cyborg, Aquaman, the Flash, the Justice League. Basically, Lex Luthor is trying to find these people, and what you find out at the end, which is why I'm saying that anxiety that he has, that urgency, that what he has is he is trying to basically prepare himself for when Darkseid comes. And Darkseid is, like one of the great villains of DC Universe. So you can tell that that is what he is building toward, is he is trying to get, whoever he can, maybe even on his side, maybe not, I don't know. But his goal is essentially to prepare for when Darkseid comes, which ultimately Bruce decides he needs to do that. So, and I'll get to that eventually. So, but one of the great things about this movie is that it really does, much like Watchmen, pose that question about vigilante justice and, the role of superheroes in the world. When, what laws do they abide by? How are they allowed to basically choose when they can act and when they can't? So it does pose that question, which I always love. I always love, kind of the moral gray area, which I'm glad that they added to Superman, because pretty much every Superman movie before Man of Steel, there was no gray area. It was, you're breaking the law. I'm going to take you to I'm going to fly you into a jail, which is so illegal. But that was his solution. But by adding the gray area with Batman and all that, you have this, interesting story where, Superman just wants to, he just wants to do the right thing. He might just have too much power to do it. Whereas Batman wants to be able to, he wants to do the right thing too, which means getting rid of somebody who has the potential to be a danger to the entire human race, which creates the situation of Batman versus Superman, the actual fight. What actually brings them together? Well, this is where it gets silly. So Lex decides to, entice these two to fight by kidnapping Martha Kent, Superman's mom, basically. So obviously, it's a really simple solution to get these two to fight, but it also creates, the conflict and the resolution that that Superman and Batman ultimately have. The fight itself lasts about 5 minutes, and it probably shouldn't have gone too much beyond that, especially when we think back to Man of Steel, where, that massive fight between Superman and Zod was just, destroying buildings left and right. There's plenty of time for that still in this movie, but at least between Batman and Superman, it's a pretty short fight. And Batman uses his tricks to get Superman. But as he's about to kill Superman with a kryptonite spear, a spear of pure kryptonite, that's when, Superman reveals that, Martha, his mom, is kidnapped. And because Bruce's mom was named Martha, he's, has this, kind of moment of, oh my God, really? And, it kind of breaks him out of his, darkness a little bit and gives him the opportunity to do the right thing, not kill Superman, and then ultimately he and Superman decide to work together against Lex. Ultimately, Superman does not want to kill Batman. He wants to stop him being the vigilante, but he also recognizes who Batman is. He understands what he's trying to accomplish. And he sees he's probably going to be better as an ally than an enemy, because you've already got an enemy in Lex and what Lex is creating, which is Doomsday. So then, another silly thing, Batman goes to save Martha while Superman goes to confront Lex. And yet, in this time frame, somehow, Superman arrives at Lex the exact same moment that Batman is able to save Martha Kent, which doesn't make any sense to me, at least. But regardless, it does lead to a very, very cool fight scene between Batman and her captors. It's a very cool scene. Well choreographed, and it certainly gives you that perspective of why Ben Affleck really did nail the role of Batman. He really did. But then, they find out, okay, now Doomsday is here, and then Doomsday breaks loose and starts, destroying stuff, and then in comes Wonder Woman. So you get that iconic Trinity shot of, Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. So now, here we go. We've basically set up the, foundation for the Justice League. And, they fight Doomsday as a team. So each one of them has their skills that they can use to fight Doomsday. she's got her lasso. She's also just, super strong and fast. Batman has some, still has like some kryptonite bombs and things like that to kind of, keep him at bay. But since Batman is human, he can't do a ton against Doomsday, but he can do enough to really like, to at least help the fight somewhat. But it really is more the fight for Superman and Wonder Woman. And ultimately, Superman realizes that there's really only going to be one way to kill Doomsday, because anytime they attack him, he gets stronger. So the only way to do it, because this is after Doomsday got hit with a nuke and still survived. The only way to do it is to get that kryptonite spear that Batman made and just drive it through him. So Superman takes up the mantle of this, gets that spear, and just, jams it into Doomsday. And when he does it, he dies. Now, a lot of people have been vocally angry that they killed Superman in this movie, and I'm actually glad that they did for two reasons. One, if you have Doomsday in the movie, you have to kill Superman. It's just the way it goes. The first time Superman died in the comics was at the hands of Doomsday. So if you're going to bring Doomsday into the movies, you need to kill Superman. Now, is he dead? No. He is certainly going to be back in the Justice League movie when it comes out next year. But they needed to do that with Doomsday to really like hammer home kind of the emotional impact and kind of show that Superman doesn't just save people, without a scratch. He actually has to save people by sacrificing himself, which is an important role. The other reason I didn't mind it so much was because it also really just puts that, puts the importance on the Justice League. If you're going to build a Justice League, you really need to do something like this, like kill Superman. By killing Superman, now Bruce Wayne can kind of rally these other ones who, they might not be as strong as Superman, but they can certainly be, good, assets to humanity, especially since he knows, after interrogating Lex, he realizes, well, something bad is coming, and that bad thing is, he doesn't know it's Darkseid, but it's Darkseid, which means it's something big, it's something bad, and, far worse than anything Doomsday or even Superman could do to humanity. So, basically, that's kind of the movie in a nutshell. But I haven't said my key gripe. I've said there's good, there's bad, but there's one thing that really, really bugged me. As much as, the plot was kind of, really difficult to follow, there were a lot of just kind of like doy-hickey kind of moments, but the one thing that annoyed me beyond belief was the whole incident with the spear. So Batman creates this spear, which, pure kryptonite, so even holding it, Superman is weak. But when he doesn't kill him, Lois basically takes the spear, goes over to a flooded stairwell, and drops the spear into the stairwell. Now, for some reason, she decides to, go outside and see, oh, something's going on. I should go back and get the spear. So she goes back, gets the spear, but in trying to get it, she's almost, crushed in the water, and as she's about to drown, Superman saves her, gets the spear, and then goes on his way. My problem here is twofold. One, that whole situation was pointless. Why did Lois throw it in the water in the first place and then go get it when she didn't even know she needed it? There's nothing that compelled her to get that spear again because she didn't know what Doomsday was. She didn't know Doomsday was, Kryptonian, that spear was going to somehow save it. She just went back and got it for some reason. It didn't make sense. And then when she's in there and she gets crushed, and nearly drowns, it's just another opportunity for Superman to come in and save her. Everything that Superman does with her is just, it's saving her, whether she's flying off a building, she's in the hands of terrorists. It's Superman saving Lois. And at what point do we get away from that trope? When do we do that? And this one was just so needless. It was so unnecessary to put her in this peril in the first place, and then somehow, Superman has to go and save her again. The whole thing just it made me groan pretty badly. But overall, the movie is enjoyable, and I'm really curious to see how they move forward with the DC Cinematic Universe, because this movie had a lot of really good things. Henry Cavill did better as Superman than he did in Man of Steel. I'll give him that. Ben Affleck was a great Batman, and then you have, a great supporting cast. Jeremy Irons is, Alfred. Can't believe I forgot that. Jeremy Irons did a fantastic job as kind of like a a more less of a butler and more of like a partner, kind of like, a guy, who can really help Bruce, with, his inventions and keep him honest, and his technology, just a really kind of like a smart foil for Batman. I love Amy Adams as Lois. Gal Gadot, haven't seen a lot of her yet, but I'm sure she's going to do well as Wonder Woman. You got Lawrence Fishburne. Jesse Eisenberg did a great job as Lex Jr. It's got a great foundation. The execution has not been perfect so far, but that doesn't mean that moving forward we can't start to see this, Justice League kind of form into something amazing. It could very well be amazing. Is it going to be as good as the Avengers? I don't know. It's different. That's the thing. It's going a different route. They're obviously trying to copy the model, but that doesn't mean that they're not doing something right on their own. So, we'll see. I'm a little more optimistic about the Justice League now than I was before I saw Batman v Superman, but I still am, curious to see where they go with it, and hopefully they can focus it a little bit better. Man of Steel and Batman v Superman both failed in the sense of not having a strongly focused, basically, story. Both of them kind of floundered in that regard. If they can focus the story in Justice League and have something a little bit more coherent, then perhaps it could be fantastic. And in its own right, not compared to the Avengers, just in its own right, it could be a fantastic movie. So, Batman v Superman, I gave 7 stars out of 10 for enjoyable movie. Pretty flawed, but certainly better than I expected. Like, I didn't go in with very high expectations. Better than I expected, and certainly something that was worth seeing it twice. So that's my review of Batman v Superman. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.